everyone, we are back and we're going to talk about the history, a little bit about art and ideas and places and spaces, because that's our theme this week. You know, we're talking about places and spaces. It's something that's actually really easy to do. So whether you're at school or you're outside at a playground playing ball, or you're at home, you can engage with places all the time. It's really easy to allow you to really tap into your curiosity. Think about you playing your video games. You're sitting in your room in a space, but then you're looking onto a screen that was created by an artist and helps you transform yourself into another space. So especially when we look at artworks where artists are representing place, but not representing them literally in the way that they appear in the world. There are very many different ways that we can explore the theme of places and spaces. Kind of a tongue tire there. One way is that you can really look at the visual elements. So things that we've went over this year, within our art elements, color, line, texture, pattern, and really look at the way artists use the visual elements to express a very specific mood or tone of a place. We can also look at artworks that represent real and imaginary places and compare them. Sometimes artists are drawn from things that they know, and sometimes artists are including things from their imagination. We're going to start, by looking at modern landscapes and really consider how artists in the modern period were thinking not only the way they viewed the world, but how they would choose to represent the world. In 1889, Van Gogh, we've talked about Van Gogh before. St. Paul became home to Vincent van Gogh, a struggling artist in his mid-30s who checked himself in after a mental breakdown. It's interesting when you think about being in this sort of enclosed space, but yet you're looking out into this very expansive landscape. What does that do to your mental state? Kind of as we are right now in 2020, fast forwarded during a pandemic. None of us been through this before, and we're all in these enclosed spaces, and we're looking out into our landscapes. And some of us have some anxiety. Some of us are feeling a lot of cabin fever. So we go back to Van Gogh. And as part of his treatment, Van Gogh was encouraged to continue painting. So he continued painting in his hallways, his ward, his doctor. But he struggled with the night sky, and Van Gogh began experimenting, and he combined many different views from the world around him in St. Paul. Mountains, cypress trees, houses. He used color. He used brushstrokes. The result, perhaps, is the most modern landscape in the history of modern landscapes. I'm sure it really is captivated and confused people. And I think that's one of the things that's great about art, is that it pushes people. And at the same time, it kind of meets us where you are. Van Gogh painted the night sky in a way no one had never really seen it before, but still it was turbulent, like Van Gogh himself. Piet Mondrian. So Paris fell to the Nazis. A Dutch-born painter, Piet Mondrian, was forced to flee whenever he was in his late 60s, and he arrived in New York City. It was love at first sight for him. Mondrian was fascinated with the landscapes and the electric lights and the people and the music. Now, whenever he was in Europe, Mondrian was a ballroom dancer, and he listened to the foxtrot music, and he was a respected painter and known for his increasingly minimal style. When he gets to New York, he listens to jazz music, and he dances the boogie woogie. And at the age of 68, his style changes again, and he paints this, his love letter to New York, Broadway Boogie Woogie. This is an actual representation of New York City. When you look at it, this is where you're drawn into the colors and the lines and the alternating patterns. And it's easy for us to make that connection of this as an urban place, as New York City. We think about buildings and the cars and the lights. One of the things that I love about artwork is that its ability to really draw you into a place. I love how artists, through their technique, can actually make that easy for you. And in this painting, it's by Andrew Wyeth. It's called Christina's World. It was actually a landscape he knew well. I think we've went over this one also in our art class. And when I look at this painting, I see this incredible detail in every blade of grass. And the longer I spend looking at this artwork, I find myself being more drawn into it. It's almost like I'm walking through the grass and I'm walking towards these houses, and I can hear the wind, and I can actually think about what it would be like to be there in these places and spaces. So this leads us to Cat Wilson's Habitat Works. I was introduced to Cat Wilson's work years ago and was fascinated by this series. Its ability to really draw you into the space and focus on the objects and the people that are in the photo. Our personal spaces can be a focus point that considers how the objects we surround ourselves with and the relationships that we build and how those things can tell stories about our lives. And here in Cat's work, you see various depictions of space, objects, and interiors and people, and she acknowledges the importance of the personal meaning of space to artists and to ourselves. Now with her new Habitat series, this is the newest, these are some of the new Habitat series, Quarantined Habitat series. She uses this series as a user-generated portraits on social media, and you see this new normal and consistent with social distancing guidelines. Wilson is asking her subjects to photograph themselves in their own quarantine situation and post them to social media with the hashtag Quarantined Habitat to document these crazy and uncertain times we are all living in at the moment. Wilson was interviewed for this series, and I'm going to read you some of her comments. She says, "I am just always trying new things and seeing what everybody is interested in, and right now people want to be part of the art." She goes on to say, "My wife is pregnant and due in 4 weeks, and there was a mention that my wife would have to give birth alone, but luckily we're at a birthing center and that won't be the case." Sorry, y'all, I'm getting a little teared up. I can't imagine going through this alone. It makes me think about how sad it is that everyone has to be alone when battling the COVID-19. We had our first friend die and he died alone. So not fair. She goes on to say, "Quarantine habitats, they make me feel not alone." I have always thought about what it will be like to look at any habitat picture in 100 years, especially your descendants. Now it's, what did it look like to quarantine 100 years ago? Look at great grandma. She had plenty of dried beans and an iPad 6. So I want you to think about what we've just went over and how art intertwines with places and spaces, and I will meet you over in the next video on how I built in the next little clip on how I built my quarantine space. Hi everyone, so we are back here. I am going to lead you through how I built my quarantine habitat portrait. First, we're going to go over this really cool step-by-step PDF document that Kat had created for this project. So she kind of laid out everything in a step-by-step format. I'm going to go over it kind of quickly because you will have this in your Google Classroom to go to and reference as you're building your habitat portrait. First, I chose my space. Of course, it's in my apartment. And I looked in my apartment and found the coolest space that I thought that would work for my photo, and I'll go over that here in a minute. And then I chose my objects, and I will go over that here in a bit. Also, compose your settings. So I set my work up in the triangle that Kat uses here in this instructions. I didn't really have to go, I didn't really have to set up my lighting because I have these huge, large windows, and it was a sunny day in my apartment. So if it hadn't been, I do know that some of you like to live in your dungeons now, but go and find a place where there is good lighting and or set up your lighting. Go into the garage if you have a garage and see if you can use your parents' clamp-on lights and any lighting that you feel like will work best for your space. Then set up your camera. I set up my camera first where I knew that I was going to be setting up the setting within the triangle, and I kept my viewfinder on, and as I built my space out, I would go and look at it in the viewfinder just so I knew that I was building the space out the way I wanted it. And I knew what the photo was going to look like, minus myself. Tips, she gives you tips here. You can use any camera from your phone to professional equipment. We've used our cameras on our iPhone and our iPads. Some of you that have used this in the past, you will be familiar with it. Middle school students, I will be going over editing and how to use those here in a little bit. If you have a really nice camera, Kat gives you a tip here. If you have a non-phone camera, the shutter speed should be 1/200th and aperture should be at 8.0. So ask your parents before you use that though, okay? So the next one is the one that I wanted to start with, was with the triangle. So as you can see here in the photo, I built everything in the triangle that led back to myself and the camera, or not the camera, I'm sorry, the painting in the back. I knew I wanted that painting to be in my photo. It was the very first painting that I did of a figure, and that is my sister in that painting, so I knew I wanted her in there. So as you can see, here's my triangle. Try to set your space up and your setting in the triangle that she provided in the instructions, and put yourself in the back. All of my stuff. Okay, so I know it's kind of working with an empty canvas or blank piece of page. Just start building, just start bringing your stuff out. Kat lists that you should build up with 10 items. I would go for more if you want to. It's going to get you a better grade, and the more thought that you put into it. So I started with all of my plants. As you can see, all of the plants here. I have plants back here, I have plants up front, and then I have plants on the side that completed my triangle. I brought out my art books. I have loads of art books. This is only just a small version of what I have. Down here I have my brushes, I have my record albums. Louisiana Rue is one of my favorite albums that I have. My artwork, and then of course Frida Kahlo. I have loads of prints by Frida Kahlo because, just Frida Kahlo. My happy pillow. And then my painting that is in the back. My artwork, of course, that I put in there. All of my artwork right in here. Yeah, I'm a bourbon lover. I love bourbon. And then I have photos of my kids, my favorite coffee mug, pictures of my kids. I put those right here. Put those right there in the front of the triangle because they made my triangle the strongest. Other people's artwork also. This little green piece is called Bound to You. It's by Autumn Brown. And let's see, my easel, of course, I had to bring that out. And then my favorite little tote bag, make artwork. And I could probably find a couple more items in here that I forgot about. So moving forward, this is how you're going to build your space out. These are the items that I want you to gather, all of the items that make you feel like this is your habitat. Get creative with it and get those items out, and then just start placing them in that triangle like Kat has ordered us to do. So I will see you here in a little bit, and we will go over editing of your photos. Okay. Okay, hey everyone, we are here in the editing portion of the video. We're at the last leg, and then I'm gonna release you to go and make your own quarantine habitat portrait. This is my final photo and I edited this in Photoshop. I know how to use Photoshop just slightly. Some of you and the digital art students, you know how to use Photoshop. I've went over this with you. If you have it at home, I would use it. If you can download it onto your phones or your iPads, it's the app version of it, and it still works pretty well also. I went in and I edited this photo, and I took out the top of the easel, and then I highlighted it, and then I worked on the levels of brightness and saturation through Photoshop. But you can still do that on your phones and on the iPad, and I'm going to show you how to do that. First step is to take a lot of photos. You digital art students, you know this is the number one rule. I can't count how many times I said this whenever we were working on photos. The more photos that you take, the easier it's going to be. If you only take a couple photos and then go in to edit them, you may find that you have nothing that you like. So, first step, and I am going to say this over and over again, take lots of photos. The more photos that you take, the better. And position yourself in different positions where you're looking at the viewers. Maybe you're looking at the computer screen or the TV while you're gaming, blah, blah, blah. Also, you can add your family members in here. I think I told you that you would get extra credit if you did that. And if you did this as a family project also, hey, have them help you do your art lesson this week. That would be awesome. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to move to the final. This was my final photo that I chose. This is the unedited version, and remember I edited my final one in Photoshop, but I am going to show you how to edit yours by just using your phone or simple app that you can get. You can get these on the iPhone, you can get it on any Android or any phone that you have, or an iPad, or even your Google Chromebook. So you can use photo editors that are out there on the internet. Please use them. Do not want to see a photo that was just taken and then submitted. I want you to work on these photos. All of you. So your first step is to go in and you're going to edit this. And I do not want to see any of these photos being edited through these filters. No filters. You have to work with the original photo. I want you to go in here and I want you to use your brain and all of the art elements that we have used this year within cropping, brightness, saturation, contrast, etc. Okay. The first step that I'm going to do is I'm going to crop this. I cropped the other one, and now I'm going to crop this one. And I don't know what just happened there, but it looks like it went in way too far. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm going to bring it back. I didn't want this, didn't want these bar stools in there. That's why I took those out. So I went in and I cropped it a little bit that way. And then I wanted it to end right there by the Frida Kahlo prints that I have. And then I cut off, as you can see up top, the little fan thing is hanging down, and I cropped that off also. I do not know how to take out this easel in editing on the phone, so we're going to leave that. My eye tends to lead off of the image whenever there's a line going off of the image, but we're going to just deal with it, okay? Maybe you can think about those things when you're setting up your portrait. Okay, so we're going to press done on that, and oops, not done for editing, but we are done with cropping. Okay, so I've got my photo cropped here, and you can go in, you can see what it looks like with an auto. It adjusts the levels of saturation and contrast for you, but we're not going to do that. As you can see, if you saw, there was a big difference in there. So I am going to go down here to exposure. Now, some of the digital art students, whenever we were doing photos earlier this year, you knew how to take a picture and to increase the exposure or lessen the exposure just by tapping on the photo before you took it and go move the levels up and down. But here you can use the same technique in editing. And it's just lightening and darkening your photo, kind of like a contrast almost. I think I'm going to leave that alone because I had a lot of light that was coming into my windows, and I'm pretty happy with that one. So we're going to go into the Brilliance. I love the new editing program on the phones and the iPads. They put in so many cool things that you can work with in your photos. And I'm going to turn the Brilliance up just a little bit. And if you notice, it looks like it's getting lighter, but what it's doing is it's just taking the Brilliance and kind of like the saturation. We're going to have a saturation to work with in here also. I'm just going to bump that up just a little bit. Okay. Then I'm going to go into your highlights. See what it's doing there. It's really bringing out the highlighted areas in your photo. I have a lot of light coming through, so it kind of does it just a little bit too much for me. If you go down, brings out the shadows a little bit too, so I'm just going to leave that one alone. The shadows. So you could bring out the shadows really on another level in this one. I hope you can see the levels as I go back and forth with this, and I'm just taking my finger and I'm going up and down, okay, with this. Let's see if I can get this area in the back a little bit darker. So yeah, see, I like how that got a little darker in the background because I really hated that was in my photo, the door in the background. So we're going to go on to the contrast. The contrast, as y'all know, the contrast is kind of like the yin and yang that we did, the light and dark. Kat talks about this in her Habitat series. And then the brightness, bump up the brightness a little bit. Bump it up a little bit, maybe around 18. Black point, this is new to me. I really have no idea. Maybe if we can get Kat to come in and do a video chat with us, or critique chat, she can tell us about that. Saturation, I really like saturation. Saturation brings out the brilliance in your colors. So let's just say this painting in the back, if I really want to work with bringing some of those brighter colors out in that painting, see how that pink or that red really jumped out? And then you can also take it down. So the only reason why I would use the saturation is to maybe bring out the color in that painting. So I'm going to bump it up just a little bit. The vibrance, the auto up top did that too, brings out the vibrance of the hues and the colors in there. So I don't want to mess with it too much. Remember, I don't want your photo to look like it's been a filter has been added to it. So warmth, we all know what warmth is the with your warm colors. So what's it going to add? It's going to add yellows and reds. Okay, and if you go down, it's going to add more blues. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone. I think I might add just a little bit of blue in there. Tint, we went over tint and shade earlier this year. Maybe add a little bit, I don't know. See how as you go down, I don't really like that look. Well, I'm gonna leave the tint alone. Sharpness just kind of adds an extra edge. Almost looks as if you're adding contrast to the photo, so I'm gonna leave that one there. Definition, really don't know what this one is either. Maybe we can ask Kat if she gets on a critique with us. So that looks pretty good. I don't like how dark it's getting some of my, like the hair in the back. I do like how it sharpens up the plants though. So noise reduction, I really don't know what that one is either, but you can play with it. I'll leave it right there. And then vignette. Okay, so this is the outer edges of your photo, kind of like putting a filter on it. I'm gonna leave that alone too, because I don't want mine to look like it has a filter. So I'm gonna click done. I'm gonna save this one, and this is my final edited version within my camera or iPad or any other photo editing version that you have that you can use online. So remember, you can bring this into your iPhone, any phone, camera, operating system that you have, an iPad, or your Google Chromebooks. You can upload those to your Chromebook and find a photo editing version online and work with your photo that way, okay? I do not want to see any filters, and I want to know that you played with the levels of hue and saturation and brightness within your photo, okay? So it's time to get started, you all. I have given you an art history lesson. I have walked you through my quarantined habitat portrait and went through some editing versions for you. And as always, I am available to you from 9 to 3, Monday through Friday. So give me a holler if you have any questions, okay? Happy photoing.